think, you could say, let's, for instance, as a good example, Toby Alderweireld, superb defender, one of the best in Europe, but was he a leader? Probably not. Whereas I always felt Vertonghen was the leader in that kind of defence. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. But yeah, so it'd be interesting to see, because obviously Alderweireld has now moved on. We know that. So if you're going to look at maybe Eric Dyer being the experienced member of that central defence, I know a lot of fans would probably not be too happy with that, but I would also say you're kind of missing out. So I do wonder whether this next centre-back, obviously Tottenham's profile is more to sign younger players. That's the way they fit. That's why, you look at certainly Gil and Romero, 20-year-old and 23-year-old. Galini's 26, which obviously is young for a goalkeeper. But, yeah, I'd be intrigued to see whether they look to try and bring an older person. Now, again, this is not from any information or anything. This is purely opinion-based, and whether they just look to not spend a lot of money, but just bring in someone that's just got that little bit of experience. And this is a weird comparison, but those who might remember him, do you remember when they brought in Nuruddin Naybet, who, for the most of the world and football, would probably think, like, what? Like, you're really going to say that he, one of the greatest signings in the world? He wasn't the greatest signing in the world, but what he brought in was a real experience to the back line. I think it was Michael Dawson he played alongside, who's just become a club ambassador, which is probably the most nailed-on club ambassador appointment ever. Absolutely lovely guy and loves the club. But back to the point, Naybet, he was just that kind of guiding voice. Just that, even if he wasn't the best defender in the world, he was just able to talk to other players and say, look, this is what you do, calm, do this now, do that, blah, blah, blah. And I just wonder whether Tottenham need that kind of player again. Like I say, they've probably missed since Vertonghen went. So yeah, I'll be intrigued to see who the next centre-back is. I do wonder, whether they stick to the original, because Paratici obviously had his, as I've always said, he has 10 players for every position. So I do wonder, does that 10 players, that we know the likes of Koundé were on there, Milenkovic was on there, Lacroix was on there, players like that, does he stick with names from that list for the second centre-back, or does he have another 10 that are maybe slightly more experienced leader types? I'm intrigued to see how that works. Obviously, with right-back, I'd say the likelihood is that they go back in and continue talks for Takahiro Tomiyasu, who is now done with the Olympics. He's an interesting one because he had an ankle injury that kept him out for the bulk of the start of the Olympics. Then he came back for the quarter-final. I think it was against New Zealand. Then he missed the semi-final a couple of days later, which I think was against Spain, which they lost. But then he was back, because I think he played 120 minutes against New Zealand. Then he was back for the the third place match, which they lost to Mexico, which he played 90 minutes against. So you'd presume his ankle is okay. Maybe they just didn't want to risk it in the semi-final, so like a few days after playing 2 hours. But as I've said before, the last time I spoke to people on his side of it, they were confident that a deal would be done after the Olympics. It'd be interesting to see now whether Spurs, they'll go to tie that up. I mean, if they've managed to not pay the fee for Romero, which is still incredible when I think about that in my head, if they've managed to not pay a fee, that could free up the funds now for Tomiyasu, who we're led to believe wasn't a huge amount of money, and they were looking for less than 20 million for him, or somewhere in that ballpark. So yeah, maybe that deal does get done now. It'd be interesting to see kind of where Spurs go with that, or whether they then change their mind and go for a more natural right back. But Tomiyasu, obviously, he's played at Bologna in right back very comfortably. He can also operate as a centre back in a back three on either side as well of that back three. I think he's also played left back. So another young player, I think he's 22 or 23, makes perfect sense to me. And I think for Spurs, it probably makes a lot of sense as well. So keep an eye on that one, see what happens. I know there's some talk about other clubs coming in, potentially even Arsenal being interested, but it would seem that the initial contact, and certainly I think a bid had been made originally for Tomiyasu. So yeah, let's see kind of what happens now that they can kind of crack on with that, and then obviously his ankle thing is now a thing of the past. Obviously, they need to get players out the door. They've got Serge Aurier, still expected to move. It's just to where. Moussa Sissoko, as I said in the last video, last I heard, there hadn't been much interest in him, which is making it difficult to move him on. Davinson Sanchez, there is interest in, certainly Sevilla interested in, which obviously will make people think of potentially Koundé. I do wonder, while every single fibre of my being would love the idea of a Romero-Koundé partnership, is it putting two younger players together? Is that awkward? Even like Joe Rodon, I think Joe Rodon is going to become a terrific centre-back. But even Rodon and Romero, is that too young a partnership to put together? I do find it all intriguing, the whole centre-back partnership thing. And exactly what you can do with it and the dynamics. I don't think it's cut as dried as, you or I would play Football Manager, we'd play FIFA, and age is no matter. We would put the best players in that team. But I guess in real life, doesn't always work like that. You really are more likely to have a more experienced centre-back partner. Not always, it does happen sometimes, but I think more likely you get that dynamic. Who else? Cameron Carter-Vickers, he's still to head out the door. Plenty of interest in him. I think it's just mainly finding the best deal for Tottenham, and obviously one that he wants as well. Young Dennis Serkin looks like he's going to move on permanently, which is a sad one. It looks like Sunderland maybe going to get him. A lot of people, I understand, will be going like, what? Why is he going? But it sounds like, from what I'm told, that he didn't want to take up the offer of the new deal that was on the table from Tottenham, or was being offered by Tottenham, looking to make it kind of elsewhere as a first-team player. I can understand that, his pathway is somewhat blocked. You've got Reguilon, Sessegnon, Davies, Tanganga can play there. I think he's been on the bench 5 or 6 times for the first team in almost every competition and has never been given minutes. So I can kind of understand it from that point of view. Just a shame to see a young talented player go, and how far he can go. I do like him as a left back. See a lot of him in academy matches, and I'm intrigued to see kind of where his level ends up being, whether it ends up being maybe a championship player or whether he can go all the way and become a Premier League player. I hope for him it's a Premier League player, but I think now kind of focus on what Tottenham get. I'd be stunned if there's not some kind of sell-on clause in there where they can get future money down the road, because I wouldn't imagine the fee would be a lot right now. But sad to see him go, obviously. And I mentioned Tanganga. It'll be interesting to see what happens with him. As I said before, Galatasaray, very serious interest in him, wanting to take him. But as I'm aware, he, at the moment, had rejected that kind of their overtures. I very clearly want to stress at the moment, because I think he's going to have a little look over the next few weeks, see what his options are, who comes into the club, how much minutes he's going to get, and then decide. Because I think ultimately Japhet Tanganga is a Tottenham boy. He's come through the club. He would like to play for Tottenham Hotspur. And if there's an indication that he will get lots of minutes potentially in the Cups and Europe, then, maybe reassess his future or next step in January. However, if it looks like if Tomiyasu's coming in and they've got Doherty there as well, and he's unlikely to play at the right, and he told me he'd prefer to play in the centre-back positions, but if they're going to bring in another 2 centre-backs and then they've already got, let's say, Rodon, Dyer, Sanchez does go, Tanganga's not going to get a lot of minutes, and I think then you have to seriously look at a loan. Spurs would prefer a UK loan for him, but ultimately it'll be down to him, and if the Galatasaray option's a good offer and he takes that, it'd be a shame to see him go, but I do think a little bit like Oliver Skip, I do think he needs that regular minutes every single every single week. So that's that for now. I mean, like I said before, I could start talking about Vlahovic and strikers, and then looking further up the pitch at the likes of Damsgaard and is it Mukwege, Noni Mukwege? I'm killing pronunciations, so I'm not even going to try that. The young 19-year-old who was at Tottenham as an academy player, Noni Madueke, I think it is. That will all come. Like I say, though, the priorities right now is another centre-back and a right-back. And I think once they've kind of got that secured, then they can definitely put their focus towards further up the pitch. And also reacting to potential departures, because there could be some departures that we're not currently expecting. Like, say, there could be a big bid comes in for the likes of let's say a Lucas Moura, for example. I'm not saying he's going to go, but using his example, he's a player Spurs have turned down big bids for in the past, And you never know, a big bid can come in, and then it's a decision for Lucas and the club. And again, but that applies to any player. I'm not just saying that about Lucas. Let's talk about Harry Kane. Right, how do I term this? I want to start off by saying I'm not going to say anything bad about Harry Kane. I'm just not, because Harry Kane, I think, has been absolutely incredible for Tottenham. I've said this before. Honestly, it's probably given me more joy watching him progress and develop and become one of the world's best than any other player at Tottenham Hotspur. You know, I love the skill of other players, the likes of Tongi, Eric Lamela over the past. But in terms of just a real joy to see someone become an utterly incredible world-class talent, I don't think anyone can surpass Harry Kane. So I'm not, if anyone's expecting me to come into this and go, oh, he's an absolute, I've seen people call him a snake and things like this. It's too much. That's not what I'm going to say at all. I'm going to talk about it a little bit but obviously the statement. That's the thing that we're talking about. That's the kind of the freshest thing. The statement that came out yesterday, again, not long before I was going to the cinema, so I didn't really have much time to kind of react or do anything to. It was very carefully worded. It very much was one of those statements where you look at what's not being said as much as what is being said. And I think it will have won, hopefully for Harry Kane, a lot of those people who are maybe undecided back behind him, which is great for Harry Kane, because like I say, you know, I don't think anyone should rubbish or write off what Harry Kane has done for Tottenham Hotspur, because I think he's been incredible. What I would say, obviously in his statement he said that as planned he would return today to Tottenham Hotspur Saturday. What I would say at this point, when I'm filming this, there's a little fly that you may see just keeps going by my eye just to deliberately distract me. I don't know what he's going by every time he goes by. But yeah, what I would say at this point of filming this, he hadn't yet returned today. But what I would also stress is, because this is quickly where aggregator Twitter accounts go, Alistair Gold says Harry Kane has not returned to training. That doesn't mean anything. He may be coming back this afternoon, because we must be aware. You must be aware that he's not coming back for training. He will be coming back for COVID test, blood work, stuff like that. So by all means, that could be done this evening. He could come, this afternoon, or even early evening. It could be at any point. So, but the fact that at this point he hasn't come back in the morning doesn't mean anything. Absolutely not saying he's not returning today. If he said he's returning today, he will return today because he knows he has to. What will then happen is, I understand, the current plan is for him to go into the lodge, the big luxury hotel within the Hotspur Way training complex, and he will stay there to isolate because of government restrictions. You know, if you're not fully vaccine jabbed up, then you have to isolate. It's what Galini did, and it's what Nuno Espirito Santo did as well. And the beauty of having the lodge is that the player can then go and do his training on a private pitch by himself. I've had some people, I put this out on Twitter earlier, and I've had some people saying, isn't that convenient? Gets to isolate, gets to stay away, we don't get to see him. You know, keep him away so he can head off to Man City. It's what he would have had to do anyway. And what I'd say is that you'd rather see him isolate at the training ground where he can continue training than isolate at home, and you're definitely not going to see it. By all means, they may be able to do photos, or he may be able to do photos of himself training away at Hotspur Way, you know. Whereas I don't quite get that line of thinking. How do I put this? Right, so the key thing is obviously a lot of people have been asking me, so was it all made up then? Right. No. Again, like I said, I don't want to say anything bad about Harry Kane, because I personally, I would always question as I've said before, I'd question the advice that has been given to Harry Kane in recent, probably months, let alone weeks. What I would say, what we know, certainly within Tottenham Hotspur, they expected him to return Monday. Monday just gone. If you're watching this next Monday, I mean Monday, the week, so was it Monday, August the 2nd? That was when he was expected back at Tottenham Hotspur by those within Tottenham Hotspur. Whether that was what Harry Kane expected, I cannot comment on. All I know that was on Monday morning, they expected to turn up for those COVID tests and the blood work, and he was still in the Bahamas, and then later would go on to Florida on his holiday. That indicates to me that there was Harry Kane had a certain plan for how long he was going to spend off, and then the club, seemingly were or did not agree to that. I don't know. Either way, the only thing I'm aware of is that those within the club expected him back on Monday. And obviously this wasn't just me saying this. If, people will go, your information's wrong. I think you'll have seen every single media outlet was reporting that. So in those 5 days after that, at no point did Tottenham say that's wrong, he's meant to come back on Saturday. At no point during those 5 days did anyone connected with Harry Kane say, no, that's wrong, he's meant to come back on Saturday. Nuno Espirito Santo, we got to ask him questions on Wednesday night after the match at Chelsea. At no point did Nuno Espirito Santo indicate that the player was to come back on Saturday. He, if anything, just simply alluded to the fact that there was a problem, and a problem that needed a solution, and that he hadn't spoken to Harry Kane at all at that point, and that matters would be dealt with internally. If everyone at Tottenham was aware that Harry Kane was coming back on Saturday, I would have hoped that Nuno Espirito Santo would have come out at that press conference and said, no, it's fine, he's coming back on Saturday. That's all I would say on that situation. And that's definitely not to call Harry Kane a liar or anything, because like I say, if you look at the way the statement is worded, I think it's very carefully worded in a certain way. And I think there's ways that you can take those sentences that you'd be daft to say that he's lying or anything like that. I'm just saying exactly what I understand the case to be from the Tottenham side. What I would also say, and I wrote about this way back, personally, I do think it's a little bit unfair that, and I think I may have said this in a previous video, I do think it's a bit unfair that the players who did better in the international tournaments, the Euros and the Copa America, in a way actually got penalised. Because, you look at, and I did. Again, I wrote this earlier in when was it? It was either June or July. I wrote that I presumed that the likes of Harry Kane, Lo Celso, Højbjerg and Sanchez would get the same month off that the likes of Rodon, Davies, Lloris, Sissoko got. Because my understanding always with Tottenham is that the minimum they want the players to rest is 3 weeks, but preferably, in most cases, it's a month. However, it looks to be the case that none of those players who got further ended up being given those that month. Like, I think Rodon, Lloris and Davies, I think it was almost to the day a month after their last match at the Euros. But clearly, and I can understand, it's more difficult for the players that got further to do that because, say, let's say, for instance, Harry Kane. I think Harry Kane was the final on the 11th. So let's say that Harry Kane was able to return on the 11th of August, a month later. Then, and this is something other people have said as well, the isolation then has to be factored in. And some people have said, this is not my view, but some people I've seen on social media have said, well, if he was due to return on Saturday, or he's saying was planned to return on Saturday, why is returning on Saturday to then isolate? Would it not have been isolating to then return fully on Saturday, if you see what I mean? But yeah, so in the original thing I was saying, if he were to return on the 11th and then had to isolate, or even without the isolation, you are returning so close to that game, and it does make it difficult. And I understand, like I say, I understand players being kind of a bit like disgruntled at the fact of having to return within less time than other players. But hey, you are kind of a victim of your own success, and that they had incredible tournaments. And what I would say, which I don't think helped Kane's cause, was that Lo Celso, obviously Copa America winner, Pierre Højbjerg got to the semi-finals. They were both due to come back in on Monday, the 2nd, and ended up actually coming back 2 or 3 days earlier just to kind of crack on. And I obviously don't think that probably helps the look of the whole thing with Harry Kane. So yeah, it's all a bit of a mess, and I think I don't understand why the statement was weighted until yesterday to come out, all of that time. I think if you wanted to make that statement, I think you made it earlier on. I thought it was a bit of a funny one, but then who am I to kind of comment on it? I do think the timing yesterday was a bit rubbish, bearing in mind it came after that Pep Guardiola press conference, which was a weird one. Especially as someone who's used to with Pochettino and Mourinho, and I think it's going to be the same with Espirito Santo, very much being told in press conferences, we will not talk about that player. He belongs to another club. That is disrespectful. And I kind of felt like Pep Guardiola's press conference was a weird one. It was almost started off like he is a Tottenham player, and then it just went far too in the other direction for me. It was all very much, well, Tottenham won't negotiate. Of course we want to sign him and all this. And it was a bit like, I don't like that. I didn't like it at all. I thought it was all too public. It almost was, I don't know. It just didn't feel like the right way of going about it. I know I've said that a fair bit in recent weeks, but it just didn't feel the right way of going about it at all. I can't imagine it will have made Spurs very happy. I can't imagine it helped the scenario whatsoever. I just think the last few days, Spurs were already clearly saying their intention was not to sell Harry Kane. I just got this feeling now that the last few days they're only going to dig their heels in even further and just absolutely shut up shop, because, at this moment in time, we've had, there's been an indication that City would come back with it. There was talk of a potential earlier bid in the window and that they would come back with a bigger bid. But the way Guardiola was talking is very much sounds like Spurs and Levy have just said, nope, not interested, which, would lend itself to Harry Kane getting, upset, I guess. But yeah, we'll see what happens in the weeks ahead. I personally would still be very surprised if a deal were to happen. I just think there's so many obstacles in the way now. And like I said, the Jack Grealish transfer coming in at 100 million makes it very clear that Tottenham would not accept anywhere near that amount, or even start talking at anywhere near that amount. And then you're getting into just huge realms of figures. And also you're at a stage where Tottenham then are getting less and less time to do deals to bring him in. And also clubs will be fully aware of the huge amount of money Tottenham would then have to spend. And it's... Yeah, I'd be surprised. You can't rule anything out. Of course you can't in football, and you can't rule, it'd be interesting to see kind of what the dynamic is with the other players and what the mood's like and how Harry Kane is. Like I've said, and I will repeat this, Harry Kane has always at Tottenham been held up to these standards of being an incredible professional. His teammates will always say that he is, one of the best trainers out there. And I'd hope, and I'd be stunned if he doesn't return to Tottenham and continue those kind of standards. But yeah, I don't, trying to see an out for him. And unless Man City were to bid incredible money, I mean, there's talk of player swaps, but I can't even see, I think they're so difficult, and especially with no disrespect to Tottenham, I think I've said this before, but no disrespect to Tottenham. Why would a Man City player on their huge wages, playing in the Champions League, want to kind of come to Tottenham, and no disrespect, play in the Europa Conference League? I mean, yes, Romero has just come from Atalanta in the Champions League to play in the Conference League, but for him, and this is, again, I keep saying this, don't I, using this expression, no disrespect to Atalanta, it probably is still a step up in terms of the club. And especially Atalanta have had incredible success in recent seasons. They've been fantastic under Gasperini, so that is to no way do down. But I think as a club and a history and probably a hell of a lot more wages as well, it's a good deal for Romero. Whereas I think a Man City player, it is a coming down. But yeah, we'll see what happens. We will. It's a very weird situation. And like I say, this last week had just been odd. It's been really, really odd. And hopefully by the time you're watching this, he's come back. Someone has reported, I'm sure Sky will have some chap getting absolutely drenched in the rain, standing outside Hotspur Way. And I'd imagine, I'd be surprised if Harry Kane's people would want him kind of smuggled into the building in the cover of darkness or with tinted windows. You'd imagine they'd want it made clear that he was back after the reaction this week. So, I may well... By the time this comes up, you may have already seen that. That's the beauty of not only recording a video, but my 1980s this week, 1980s dial-up internet, slowly uploading it to the World Wide Web. But yeah, so Harry Kane, Christian Romero, transfers. Tomorrow, Arsenal in the Mind series, got both the men and women's team playing, so that'll be good fun. I'll be kind of watching those. It'll be interesting to see who takes part, how close we get to the team that might start against Man City. I'm really intrigued to see what happens with Man City as well, because this is when I talk about Kane and not coming back. There's a lot of players, I think, still from the Euros that haven't kind of fully integrated yet, and I think Man City, from the sounds of their Community Shield team, is going to be very much a second-string team. So I'll be intrigued to see how many are then back for the Tottenham game on the 15th. You could be in a scenario where Tottenham actually have more fit first-team players ready to play that match than Man City, which could be huge for Tottenham and Nuno Espirito Santo. It could go completely the other way, and Man City may have everyone just perfectly timed and ready to be back for that, but yeah, I think there's talk that De Bruyne and Foden maybe won't be back in time because of their injuries. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that one goes. He says with hindsight, as people pick up this clip in 2 weeks' time after Spurs will wallop 5-0 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. But it may not be as huge a task as I think it was going to be. That's not to say that Man City's second team still isn't incredibly strong, but there you go. Looking forward to the Arsenal game tomorrow. Arsenal games, both of them. Don't know why that required air quotes. They are real games. And then after that, probably most people will be delighted to know I have 6 days off ahead of the Man City game. I'm going to absolutely rest. It's actually my birthday on Monday, so who knows what could happen with Tottenham. Tottenham always seemed desperate for me to work. Even last night, Kane and Romero stuff coming when I'd finished my shift and was heading into a cinema. So just imagine what a day off plus being my birthday. Who knows what could happen? It could be the most messy. It's not going to be messy, but it looks like PSG. Oh, Pochettino has gone from working with, probably getting very frustrated with some of the signings at Tottenham. He could end up next season having Messi, Neymar and Mbappe as his front three. Whoa! That is incredible. I'm kind of happy for him in that aspect. It's silly football. It is very much FIFA football, isn't it? I think, especially with the Poch pre-season in them as well, I think PSG will absolutely smash it. And, some people will rightly say, does it count for as much if you've expensively assembled that kind of thing? I mean, you look at Pep at City. I think someone said that if he now makes another transfer, or a big transfer, he's going to surpass the £1 billion spent on players in his reign at Man City. That's incredible. It's not football as we know it, but it's just unfortunate the way sport and business works. It really does. But back to the perfect storm of my day off and birthday combining on the same day. Hopefully that means you'll get something big happen on Monday. I'm sure I won't be able to stay away during the week ahead, and I probably will. I might do a video. We'll see how we go. Depends what happens. But I do need to have a little bit of a rest. As you can see, I look rather knackered. And I'm sure my family would like me to have a bit of a rest as well. So hey, I've actually waffled on for far longer than I thought I was actually going to do in this video. So you got 40 minutes. I was going to say a good 40 minutes. I wouldn't say it was a good 40 minutes, but you got more than 40 minutes. And I'm going to head off and enjoy what is a day off today, which may mean something happens this afternoon. But there you go. So yeah, I'm just trying to think if I've ticked every box I wanted to talk about. I think I have. I'm sure there'll be people saying, what about this? What about that? But I will cover that at a later date, hopefully. Just remind me. So yeah, I'm going to head off now. As always, look after yourselves, stay healthy, stay safe, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.